Patterson, Trade Show Guy. And on this little presentation, how to sell your boss on a new trade show exhibit project, we look at some of the aspects of, let's say you got a team of 3 or 4 or 5 in the marketing department, or maybe a little more, and you've got management to deal with, and someone's got the purse string. So there's a lot involved in getting a trade show booth done. Now, you may think you need one, maybe you don't, maybe you do, but there are certainly some things to look at to, how do you pitch your boss? How do you sell your boss on a new trade show exhibit and increase the chances of making it happen? Well, you do it by preparing very, very well. So where do you start? First question is, how do you justify the expense? Well, you must understand, of course, there's no single answer that applies across the board. Are you looking at a brand new booth, maybe a significant upgrade to an existing booth, or just want to add a few elements to the thing? So let's look at some of the places you can examine in your preparation. First of all, let's check your current status. Is your current trade show marketing program consistently bringing in new leads? This means what you're really doing is trying to validate the fact that you have a trade show program. Are you going to trade shows on a regular basis, bringing home lots of business from this? Is it generate a lot of income for the company? Are you spending maybe a third of your marketing budget on trade shows? This really validates your current trade show marketing program, because you want to show, of course, that you're consistently bringing in new leads with this program. And are those leads turning into clients? If this is the case, maybe the question is, hey, nothing's broken. Why should we fix it? And then, on the other hand, it's quite possible that you might be going through some growing pains. The company's got some challenges, but they're good challenges. It's been said that, I'd love to have the problem of having to deal with doing all this business that we're doing, because that means we got to hire more people. We got to put more people in place on the streets. We got to put whatever it is. Growing pains create their own problems, though. So when it comes to the trade show booth, does your current booth have a lack of space? It could be that there's not enough client meeting space. Maybe you don't have enough product display area. It could be that no matter what you do, you got a 10 by 20, 10 by 30, maybe an island of a 20 by 20, but you've just always got a crowded booth because there's so many people coming to see you. So now you're looking at growing pains. What kind of things are you addressing in this question? Do you have issues because of the current booth? On the flip side, what if you didn't do anything? What would happen if you did not invest in a new booth? Is there a chance that you'd be satisfied by holding firm, basically, doing the same thing for the next couple of years? Maybe, for instance, how would your visitors perceive your current booth over the next 2 to 3 years? So you got to ask yourself the question, what if you didn't do anything? Would you be okay with that for at least a year or 2 or 3? Maybe minor upgrades. Another area to look at is competition. What are your direct competitors doing? It's true. At trade shows, perception is very, very, very important. One thing you might consider is doing a SWOT analysis. This looks at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. Also, look at what your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats might be of your main competitors. So I think that's a very serious thing to consider and very important in your calculations. What exactly are your strengths? Where do you fall short on some things? What are some of the ways you can grow and get into further markets? It may mean that going to different trade shows and having a new booth opens up new markets. Very, very common to use trade shows to open yourself to new markets. There might be threats, though. Maybe you've got competitors that are just going to pummel you. So how do you deal with those particular threats? Is a new booth really the answer? Maybe you should look at something else. Instead of investing tens of thousands of dollars into a brand new booth, what if you invested $5,000 or $6,000 into booth staff training? Maybe that would give them the key to take your current booth, because booth staff training, your staff has got to know what they're doing in the booth. So maybe you invest your money elsewhere. Maybe you invested in pre-show marketing or post-show follow-up and support. So if you're investing in other areas such as staff and marketing support, you might be able to put off that exhibit investment by a few years. Now, am I trying to talk you into or out of a booth? Neither. What I'm trying to get you to do is to see that you should examine all alternatives. And maybe the best alternative is to not do anything except put a few dollars into pre-show marketing or booth staff training instead of investing heavily in a new booth right now. But it may come down to, we really, really, really need a new booth. So some things to look at here. It is, of course, a very significant capital investment. So you want to understand what it takes to design and fabricate a booth. You got to figure out what it's going to cost. And on the flip side of that, what can you afford? So you've got to ask some hard questions. What kind of money will it take to do all this? How long will it take? What is the time frame necessary to make all of this happen? And once you have a new booth into place, what's the life of the new exhibit? How long will this booth be used? Can you use it 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, or more? And during that time, will upgrades be needed? All very important to consider. Also to consider, how will the exhibit affect people? And this means those that are currently doing the things like logistics, shipping the booth, setup, dismantle. Does it mean that you have to hire some people internally to do that? It just depends on what all those questions mean. So examine, how will a new exhibit affect people in your business? What's going to be the cost for installation and dismantling? What about costs for shipping and storage? So examine all of these things. Get the cost factors. Talk to exhibit houses. You might want to check the other video in this package, which is how to send out a request for proposal on how to deal with exhibit houses. When it comes down to it, though, you want to have a presentation that is ready. So once you've got your presentation, here's what to do in your pitch. What to include. First of all, list a number of potential exhibit houses. You may know a couple personally. You may have examined a few online. You may have looked at competitors and said, okay, these guys did a great booth for that other company that we're competing with. Get a written description of what that possible exhibit might be, what the function is, how big it is, what kind of aspects in it, what the branding is going to be. Get a reasonable price range for the project by talking to some exhibit houses or doing some online research and figuring out what the average cost per square foot or cubic foot, or I should say square foot and linear foot for exhibits are. Inline booths are typically estimated at linear feet around $1,000 per linear foot. So a 10 by 10 would be around $10,000. That's industry average, close to that. A 10 by 20, close to $20,000. And if you're looking at booths that are custom island booths, you're looking at something like $135 to $150 or $160 per square foot. So if you got a 20 by 20, do the math. If you got a 30 by 40, you're looking at, do the math on that. Those are at least price ranges to consider while you're making your pitch. And it might be that if you have a rough idea or even a really good idea of what your booth should be, take that idea. It may be a sketch. It may be just a back of a napkin type of sketch, but take that to an exhibit house and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're trying to put together a budget for this so we can figure out where that money is going to come from. They'll be glad to help you, believe me, because they may, look to get some business out of this. They'll give you a realistic figure and a realistic time frame to determine how long this project will take. Show as much as hard cost you can versus new business. So hard costs, dollars won versus dollars spent, in addition to showing how the cost will be justified by the return of the new business. You can also detail some of the soft return. Soft reasons to spend more money may include things like increased business opportunities due to the larger booth, more visibility at the shows, easier and quicker setup times because you've got a newer booth. It may be made out of aluminum and fabric versus wood, so it's going to ship easier. A perception of being bigger and better than your competitors, bigger and better branding opportunities for your booth, and so on. So be as specific as possible. You can say things like, our brand new booth will give us a 300% increase in visible graphic display area to show off our brand and products compared with our current display. And we'll have 400% more meeting area for potential clients. So detail that out when you're looking at meeting a bigger booth and a bigger booth budget. So your management understands what they're going to get out of it at each and every show that you guys go to. Also, amortize the cost over 3 to 5 to 7 years, and then compare that, for instance, to some other costs that you might invest in. The cost of investing in a new employee. Do cost comparisons on which is a better investment to bring in new business. It may mean that a new employee in a certain position might be a better investment. It might mean that your cost of the booth is actually 3 employees for the year, but that's going to open up our 2 opportunities and bring in more business because you've done the calculations that can show you might be able to hire 3 or 4 people as a result of getting that booth out there in place. So use whatever combination of those methods that you think are working best for your situations, and by all means, good luck.